I'm Emma, 29 years old, sitting in the dining room of Bella Vista, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, watching my older brother Derek's face drain of all color. 30 seconds ago, he was smirking as he spat in my pasta and delivered his usual cruel line about dogs eating last. Now the head chef is standing beside our table, asking me if I want Derek fired from his job. The same job Derek has bragged about for months. The same restaurant where he thought he could humiliate me one more time. The chef is waiting for my answer, and I can see the panic spreading across Derek's face as he realizes what's about to happen. Before I tell you how Derek's smug expression completely vanished, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had a sibling who made your life hell growing up. I was born in small-town Wisconsin, the youngest of 3 kids in the Morrison family. My dad worked construction, my mom was a nurse at the local hospital, and we were solidly middle class. Nothing fancy, but we had everything we needed. Derek was 4 years older than me, and from the day I could walk, he made it his mission to remind me that I was the unwanted third child. Our house was a modest 2-story on Maple Street, with a wraparound porch that my mom loved to decorate for every season. Derek got the bigger bedroom upstairs because he was older, while I had the tiny room next to the laundry room where the washer would shake the walls every time Mom did a load. But that wasn't what bothered me most. What bothered me was how Derek seemed to take genuine pleasure in making me feel small. The pattern started early. When I was 6 and Derek was 10, I remember being so excited to show him the butterfly I'd caught in a mason jar during recess. I'd carefully poked holes in the lid and even added some grass for it to eat. Derek took one look at my treasure and said, "Butterflies don't eat grass, dummy. You're basically torturing it." Then he opened the jar and let it fly away, watching my face crumple with what looked like satisfaction. Growing up, Derek was what adults called gifted. He was on the honor roll every semester, played varsity baseball, and had this natural charisma that made teachers and coaches love him. Our parents, especially Dad, beamed with pride whenever Derek brought home another award or made another team. "That's my boy," Dad would say, ruffling Derek's hair while I stood there feeling invisible. Meanwhile, I was average. Not stupid, just normal. I got B's and C's, tried out for the volleyball team, and got cut, and spent most of my free time reading or helping Mom in the kitchen. Derek never missed an opportunity to point out the difference between us. When I'd struggle with homework, he'd say things like, "Maybe you should stick to easier classes, Em. Not everyone can be smart." When I didn't make the team, it was, "Don't worry, some people are just naturally athletic and others aren't." The worst part was how he did it. Derek was smart enough to be cruel in ways that adults couldn't see. He'd say these things with a smile like he was being helpful or encouraging. If I complained to our parents, they'd say things like, "Derek's just trying to help," or "Stop being so sensitive, Emma." High school was brutal. Derek was a senior when I was a freshman, which meant he had the power to make my social life hell. He'd intercept my conversations with boys I liked, telling them embarrassing stories about me. He'd accidentally spill things on my clothes before school events. Once, he convinced me that the school dance was casual dress when it was actually formal, so I showed up in jeans while everyone else wore dresses and suits. When Derek graduated and got into Northwestern University on a baseball scholarship, our house became peaceful for the first time in my life. My parents acted like he'd cured cancer or something. There was a huge graduation party in our backyard, and Dad kept telling everyone who'd listen about his son, the college athlete. I thought things would get better when he left for college, and for a while they did. I actually started to come out of my shell my junior and senior years. I joined the debate team, made some real friends, and even had a boyfriend named Josh who thought I was funny and smart. For the first time, I felt like maybe I wasn't the family failure after all. But Derek came home for holidays and summers, and every time he did, he'd find new ways to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. He'd make comments about my weight, my clothes, my grades, my boyfriend. Nothing was ever good enough, and somehow he always managed to make these observations when our parents weren't around to hear them. The summer before my senior year, things escalated. Derek had just finished his sophomore year at Northwestern and came home full of stories about his internship at some prestigious marketing firm in Chicago. He'd grown taller, more confident, and even more convinced of his own superiority. I had been working part-time at the local diner to save money for college, and I was proud of myself for being responsible and earning my own cash. The job wasn't glamorous. I waited tables, cleaned, and helped in the kitchen, but I liked the independence and the fact that my boss, Mrs. Patterson, actually appreciated my work ethic. Derek found this hilarious. "Little Emma, serving pie to truckers," he'd say with mock affection. How quaint. He'd tell our parents that he was proud of me for finding work I was suited for, with just enough emphasis on those last words to make it clear what he really meant. The breaking point came during a family barbecue that July. Derek had invited some of his Northwestern friends home for the weekend, and Dad was grilling burgers while showing off his star athlete's son. I was helping Mom bring side dishes outside when one of Derek's friends, a guy named Trevor, started asking me about my plans for college. I was actually excited to talk about it. I'd been accepted to UW-Madison with plans to major in communications, and I had real dreams about maybe working in journalism or public relations someday. Trevor seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions about my goals and telling me about similar programs at Northwestern. Derek must have been listening from across the patio because he suddenly appeared beside us with that familiar smile that never reached his eyes. "Oh, Emma's got big dreams," he said, putting his arm around my shoulder in what looked like brotherly affection, but felt like a trap. "She wants to be a reporter or something. Isn't that sweet?" Trevor nodded. "That's awesome. Communications is a great field." "It is," Derek agreed. "For people who have the talent for it. Emma's more of a practical dreamer. She's got the heart for it, even if she doesn't have the skill set. But hey, not everyone can be a natural communicator, right, Em?" The way he said it made my dreams sound childish and unrealistic. Trevor's expression shifted from interest to polite sympathy, and I felt that familiar burning shame creep up my neck. I mumbled something about needing to help Mom and escaped back to the kitchen, where I hid in the pantry and cried quietly while the party continued outside. That night, after everyone had gone home, I confronted Derek in our living room. I was tired of pretending his comments didn't hurt, tired of being the family punching bag. "Why do you do that?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why do you always have to make me feel stupid?" Derek was sprawled on the couch, flipping through channels with the remote. He barely looked at me. "Do what?" "You know exactly what. The thing with Trevor tonight. The way you made my college plan sound like a joke." He finally looked up, and for a moment I thought maybe he'd actually acknowledge what he'd done. Instead, he shrugged. "I wasn't making fun of you, Em. I was being realistic. Someone needs to manage your expectations." "Manage my expectations?" "Look," he said, sitting up and using the tone he probably used with children or confused elderly people. "You're not stupid, okay? But you're not exceptional either. You're perfectly average, and there's nothing wrong with that. Most people are average, but you keep setting these big goals like you're going to be some hotshot journalist, and it's just setting yourself up for disappointment." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. I got into Madison. My grades are good enough for their communications program. "Getting in and succeeding are two different things," Derek said. "I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to help you be realistic about your limitations." That word, limitations, hit me like a physical blow. I stood there staring at my brother, this person who was supposed to love and support me, and realized that he genuinely believed I was destined for mediocrity. Worse, he thought he was doing me a favor by crushing my dreams before the world could do it for me. I went to my room that night and made a decision. I was going to prove Derek wrong, not just about college, but about everything. I was going to become so successful that he'd have to eat every condescending word he'd ever said to me. I discovered I actually was good at communication. Really good. I had a knack for understanding what made people tick, for crafting messages that resonated, for building relationships. My professors noticed, my editors praised my work, and slowly the confident person I'd never been allowed to be at home started to emerge. Derek's visits home became less frequent as college went on, but when he did come back, the dynamic was always the same. He'd ask about school with that patronizing interest, make subtle digs about my little newspaper articles, and generally treat me like I was playing dress-up in adult clothes. After graduation, Derek got a job at a prestigious marketing agency in Chicago and moved into a fancy apartment in Lincoln Park. He made sure everyone knew about his success, posting constantly on social media about client dinners, work trips, and his fabulous urban lifestyle. I, meanwhile, started as a junior associate at a communications firm in Milwaukee. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was modest, but I was learning and growing. Derek's response when I told the family about my job was predictably underwhelming. "Milwaukee's nice. Good place to cut your teeth before you figure out what you really want to do." The implication was clear. This was just a stepping stone to something more realistic, not a real career. For the next 3 years, I worked my ass off. I took on every project, stayed late, traveled for clients, and slowly built a reputation as someone who could handle complex campaigns and deliver results. My boss, Sarah Chen, became a mentor who actually believed in my potential. "You've got instincts," she told me during my second-year review, "and you're willing to do the work. That combination will take you far." Derek, meanwhile, had been promoted twice and was making what he described as serious money. He'd started dating Vanessa, a fellow marketing executive, and their Instagram perfect relationship was another thing he could hold over me. Family dinners became unbearable recitations of Derek's achievements, while my own progress was politely acknowledged and quickly moved past. The breakthrough came during my third year when I landed a major client for our firm, a regional restaurant chain that wanted to rebrand and expand. It was exactly the kind of account that could make someone's career, and Sarah gave me the lead on it. I poured everything I had into that campaign. I researched food trends, studied the client's competition, conducted focus groups, and developed a comprehensive strategy that repositioned them from a local comfort food chain to a modern, health-conscious brand that still honored their roots. The campaign was a massive success. The client's revenue increased by 40% in the first 6 months. They expanded to 3 new cities, and the work won 2 industry awards. Suddenly, I wasn't just a junior associate anymore. I was the person who delivered one of the firm's biggest wins of the year. The recognition led to opportunities I'd never imagined. Sarah recommended me for a speaker slot at the Wisconsin Marketing Association's annual conference. Industry publications wanted to interview me about the campaign. Other firms started calling with job offers. But the biggest opportunity came from an unexpected source. Marcus Rivera, CEO of Rivera Communications, one of Chicago's most respected boutique agencies, had seen my work and wanted to meet. Rivera Communications specialized in food and hospitality clients, and Marcus was looking for someone to head up their expansion into the Midwest market. "I've been watching your career," Marcus told me during our lunch meeting at a trendy spot in downtown Milwaukee. "The restaurant campaign was brilliant, but more than that, I can see you understand this industry. You get what makes food brands connect with people." The offer was incredible. Senior Vice President of Midwest Operations, a salary that was double what I was making, equity in the company, and the chance to build something from scratch. I'd be based in Chicago, managing a team, and working with some of the most exciting restaurant brands in the region. I called my parents that night to share the news, expecting them to be thrilled. They were happy, of course, but there was something restrained about their response. "Chicago's expensive," Mom worried. "Are you sure you're ready for that kind of pressure?" "Derek will be so helpful having you in the same city," Dad added. "He knows all the best neighborhoods." It was like they couldn't conceive of me succeeding in Chicago independent of Derek's guidance and support. Even my biggest professional triumph was somehow filtered through my brother's superior knowledge and experience. I didn't tell Derek about the job until after I'd accepted it and found an apartment. I wanted to present it as a done deal, not something he could weigh in on or try to manage. His reaction was perfectly Derek. Rivera Communications? I've heard of them. Nice little boutique shop. Good for you, Em. It'll be great experience. Little boutique shop. As if Rivera wasn't one of the most respected agencies in the city. As if my new role wasn't a bigger opportunity than most people get in their entire careers. And hey, Derek continued, warming to his theme, now that you'll be in Chicago, maybe I can introduce you to some people. Help you navigate the industry here. It's a lot more competitive than Milwaukee. Even my success had to be reframed as something he could help me with, guide me through, manage. Moving to Chicago felt like starting over, but in the best possible way. Rivera Communications had offices in a converted warehouse in the West Loop, with exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, and an energy that crackled with creativity and ambition. My team was small but talented, 3 account executives, 2 designers, and a data analyst who could make numbers tell stories. We worked on campaigns for farm-to-table restaurants, craft breweries, food trucks that had grown into empires, and artisanal food producers who were scaling nationally. The work was challenging and rewarding in ways I'd never experienced. Every day brought new problems to solve, new brands to build, new stories to tell. I was good at it, really good, and for the first time in my life I was surrounded by people who saw that clearly. Marcus became both a boss and a mentor, teaching me about the business side of the industry while giving me the freedom to develop my own approach. You have something special, he told me after I'd been there 6 months. You don't just understand marketing, you understand people. The Midwest division grew faster than anyone had projected. We landed a major contract with a restaurant group that was expanding into 5 new markets. We helped a struggling Chicago institution rebrand and come back from near bankruptcy. We developed campaigns that got written up in industry publications and studied in business schools. Derek and I would run into each other occasionally at industry events, and his attitude toward my work remained consistently patronizing. He'd introduce me to his colleagues as his little sister who works in food marketing, with just enough emphasis on food to make it sound quaint and specialized, as opposed to his broader, more serious work in general marketing. Emma's doing really well in her niche, he'd say, like I was crafting artisanal jam instead of building major brands. The success continued through my second year at Rivera. We opened a second office, hired 10 more people, and I was promoted to executive vice president with a compensation package that put me in the top tier of earners in my field. I bought a condo in Lincoln Park, the same neighborhood Derek lived in, and started building the kind of life I dreamed about but never quite believed was possible. Derek's response to my growing success was to subtly minimize it. When I mentioned my promotion at a family dinner, he said, "That's great, Em, you've really found your lane." When I told them about buying the condo, it was, "Real estate's a great investment in that area. I could give you some tips on navigating the market." Everything I achieved was either a lucky break, a natural fit for my limited skill set, or something he could help me optimize. Never just success that I'd earned through talent and hard work. The dynamic shifted dramatically when Rivera Communications was acquired by a national agency network for an 8-figure sum. As an equity holder, my payout was substantial, enough to pay off my condo, max out my retirement accounts, and still have more money in the bank than I'd ever imagined. But more importantly, the acquisition came with an offer for me to head up the food and hospitality division for the entire network, overseeing campaigns across the country. It was the kind of role that would put me on industry 40 under 40 lists and speaking at national conferences. I was 28 years old, running a division with 50 employees and a 9-figure annual budget, working with brands that millions of people recognized. It was success beyond anything I dared to dream when Derek had called me perfectly average in our family living room. The financial rewards of the acquisition also allowed me to pursue a passion project I'd been thinking about for years. I started a foundation focused on providing marketing support to women-owned food businesses, particularly those in underserved communities. It wasn't just about giving back. It was about using my skills and resources to level the playing field for people who reminded me of my younger self. Derek's awareness of my actual success level was limited. He knew I'd been promoted and that my company had been acquired, but he didn't know the full scope of either development. In his mind, I was still his little sister who'd gotten lucky in a specialized field, not an industry leader who was being courted by competitors and quoted in the Wall Street Journal. This delusion was about to be shattered in the most public way possible. The opportunity for the ultimate reckoning came through an unexpected channel. One of my foundation's grant recipients was an up-and-coming chef named Isabella Santos, who was opening her dream restaurant in Chicago's Gold Coast. Isabella's story was compelling. She'd grown up undocumented, worked her way through culinary school, and was finally ready to showcase her innovative fusion of Mexican and Italian cuisines. Isabella needed more than just marketing support. She needed connections to help her navigate Chicago's competitive restaurant scene. When she mentioned she was struggling to hire experienced front-of-house staff, I offered to make some introductions. That's when I learned something interesting about Derek's current employment situation. It turned out that Derek had been let go from his marketing agency 6 months earlier. The official story was downsizing, but through my industry connections, I learned it was actually performance-related. Derek had been coasting on his early success and hadn't developed the deeper skills needed for senior-level work. Rather than admitting this to our family, Derek had been freelancing and telling everyone he was consulting. The truth was, he was struggling to find steady work and was taking whatever jobs he could get to maintain his lifestyle. One of those jobs was waiting tables at Bella Vista, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. It was ironic. Derek, who'd mocked my teenage job at the local diner, was now doing essentially the same work, just in a more upscale environment. I learned this through my industry network when Isabella mentioned she was thinking of applying for a serving position at Bella Vista to gain experience in fine dining service. A contact at a hospitality recruiting firm mentioned that Bella Vista was notoriously difficult to get hired at, and that they'd recently brought on someone with a marketing background who was surprisingly good at the customer service aspects of the job. Derek Morrison, she said. He's been there about 4 months, nice guy, very smooth with the customers. I felt a mix of emotions hearing this. Part of me felt bad for Derek. Losing a job is never easy, and having to take a service position when you're used to white-collar work must have been humbling. But a larger part of me was stunned by the hypocrisy. This was the same person who'd spent years making me feel small for working at a diner, who'd called my career a niche, who'd treated my success as lucky rather than earned. I didn't immediately do anything with this information. I wasn't actively planning some elaborate revenge. I was busy with my own life and career, and honestly, I'd reached a place where Derek's opinion of me mattered less and less. But life has a way of creating opportunities for justice, and mine came during a dinner at Bella Vista. Marcus had arranged a dinner with a potential client, the CEO of a restaurant group that was considering our agency for a major rebranding project. The client, Janet Walsh, had specifically requested to meet at Bella Vista because she wanted to experience what she called the gold standard of hospitality before deciding who would handle her company's image. I'd been to Bella Vista once before for a work event, and it truly was exceptional. The kind of place where every detail was perfect, where the service was choreographed like a ballet, where diners paid $200 per person and felt like they were getting value for their money. Marcus, Janet, and I were seated at a prime table overlooking the Chicago River, and our conversation was going exceptionally well. Janet was impressed with our portfolio, our approach to brand storytelling, and our track record with similar clients. We were about halfway through the meal when our server approached to check on us. It was Derek. "Good evening," he said with his practiced charm. "I'm Derek, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. How is everything so far?" Janet smiled and began to respond, but Derek's eyes had found me, and I watched his expression shift from professional warmth to complete shock. His mouth actually fell open slightly before he recovered his composure. "Emma," he said, clearly forgetting where he was for a moment. "Hello, Derek," I replied calmly. "I didn't know you worked here." The table fell silent as Marcus and Janet picked up on the suddenly charged atmosphere. Derek's face was cycling through emotions: embarrassment, confusion, and something that looked like anger. "This is my brother," I explained to my dinner companions. "Derek, this is Marcus Rivera, my CEO, and Janet Walsh." Derek's training kicked in, and he managed to shake hands and exchange pleasantries, but I could see him calculating how to handle this unexpected encounter. In his mind, I was sure I was the little sister who might embarrass him in front of customers. "Well," Derek said, his voice slightly strained but still professional, "it's always nice to see family. Can I get you anything else at the moment?" We assured him we were fine, and he retreated to give us space. I could see him watching our table from across the dining room, his posture tense. "Your brother seems nice," Janet said diplomatically. "He is," I replied, not elaborating on our complicated relationship. The dinner continued, and Derek seemed determined to provide impeccable service, perhaps hoping to minimize any potential embarrassment. He was attentive without being intrusive, knowledgeable about the menu, and generally professional. But as the evening progressed, I could see his discomfort growing. Having his little sister witness him in a service role, especially when she was clearly in a business dinner with executives, was eating at him. The breaking point came when Derek was serving our entrees. He'd been careful and respectful all evening, but as he placed my pasta dish in front of me, he couldn't resist a quiet dig that only I could hear. "Enjoying your fancy dinner, Emma?" he murmured as he leaned over my chair. "Must be nice to play with the big kids." The comment was so perfectly Derek, the need to reassert superiority even when he was literally serving me dinner, that I almost laughed. But before I could respond, Derek managed to make the situation infinitely worse. As he straightened up from placing my dish, he seemed to have a moment of vindictive inspiration. Maybe he was angry about being caught in a service job, maybe he was frustrated by the reversal of our usual roles, or maybe he just couldn't stand seeing me succeed. Whatever his motivation, Derek deliberately let a small amount of saliva drop into my pasta, and then, looking me straight in the eye, said just loud enough for the table to hear, "There you go, dogs eat last, remember?" The reference was to something he'd said to me countless times growing up, any time I had to wait for dinner or got served last, or wasn't included in something immediately. "Dogs eat last" was his way of reminding me of my place in the family hierarchy. But saying it here, in this context, after deliberately spitting in my food, was so far beyond inappropriate that it took a moment for even me to process what had happened. Marcus and Janet stared in shocked silence. The other diners at nearby tables had heard nothing, but our little corner of the restaurant felt like a bomb had gone off. Derek seemed to realize immediately that he'd gone too far, but there was no taking it back. He stood frozen beside our table, holding an empty tray, looking like a man who'd just watched his life implode in real time. I looked at my pasta, then at Derek, then at my dinner companions who were watching this family drama unfold in one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. "Derek," I said quietly, "you just spat in my food and called me a dog in front of my clients." He opened his mouth to deny it, but before he could speak, a voice behind him said, "Excuse me, is there a problem here?" We all turned to see Chef Roberto Antonelli, Bella Vista's head chef and owner, standing beside our table. Roberto was a legend in Chicago's culinary scene, a James Beard winner who'd built Bella Vista into one of the most respected restaurants in the city. Roberto had clearly been watching from the kitchen, or had been summoned by the unusual tension at our table. His expression was serious as he took in the scene. Derek frozen with the tray, me staring at my pasta, and Marcus and Janet looking deeply uncomfortable. "I couldn't help but notice some commotion," Roberto continued, his voice carefully controlled. "Is everything satisfactory?" This was the moment of truth. I could smooth things over, protect Derek from the consequences of his actions, and pretend nothing had happened. It would be the diplomatic thing to do, the family loyal thing to do. Or I could tell the truth and let Derek face the full consequences of his behavior. I thought about every dogs eat last comment, every dismissive remark about my career, every time he'd made me feel small and worthless. I thought about him working at this restaurant, while telling our family he was consulting, while still treating me like I was the family failure. Most of all, I thought about the fact that he'd just humiliated me in front of important business contacts because he couldn't stand to see me in a position of success. "Actually, Roberto," I said, looking directly at Derek, "there is a problem. Derek just intentionally spat in my food and made an inappropriate comment about dogs." Derek's face went from pale to completely white. "Emma, no, that's not what happened." But Roberto had already seen enough. As the owner of an exclusive restaurant where reputation was everything, he knew that any behavior that could damage the establishment's image was unacceptable. "Derek," Roberto said, his voice cold, "step away from the table, please." Derek looked around desperately as if searching for an escape route. "Roberto, I can explain. This is my sister. We were just—" "Step away from the table," Roberto repeated. "Now!" Derek moved back, still holding the tray, his hands visibly shaking. Roberto turned to me with a grave expression. "Ma'am, I cannot apologize enough for what you've experienced here tonight. This behavior is completely unacceptable and does not represent the standards of Bella Vista." He paused, studying Derek with the kind of disappointed expression that was somehow worse than anger. "Derek has been a member of our team for 4 months," Roberto continued, "and until tonight, his performance has been satisfactory. However, what just occurred is grounds for immediate termination." Derek made a strangled sound. "Roberto, please, I need this job. It was just a family thing. I wasn't thinking—" Roberto held up a hand to stop him. "You deliberately contaminated a guest's food and made a derogatory comment. In this industry, either one of those actions alone would be cause for dismissal." He turned back to me. "The question is, how would you like us to handle this situation?" And that's how I found myself with the power to decide Derek's fate. The brother who'd spent years making me feel worthless was now standing in front of me, his job hanging by a thread, waiting for me to make a choice. I could see the panic in Derek's eyes as he realized the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about losing a job. Getting fired from Bella Vista for guest misconduct would make him essentially unemployable in Chicago's restaurant industry. Word would get around and his reputation would be destroyed. The entire dining room had gone quiet around us. Other servers were watching from a distance. The kitchen staff had emerged to see what was happening, and even some of the other diners were openly staring. "Ma'am," Roberto prompted gently, "what would you like us to do?" I looked at Derek, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years. He was 33 years old, standing in a restaurant uniform, begging me with his eyes not to destroy his life. The confident, superior big brother who'd spent decades cutting me down was gone, replaced by a desperate man who'd just realized he'd bet everything on a moment of cruelty and lost. Part of me wanted to savor this moment, to let Derek twist in the wind he'd created for himself. After all the years of being told I was average, limited, not good enough, there was something deeply satisfying about having the power to determine his future. But as I sat there, looking at my brother's terrified face, I realized something important. I didn't need Derek to suffer for me to feel successful. His opinion of me had already lost its power to hurt me. I was 29 years old, running a division of a major agency, making more money than I'd ever dreamed of, and building a career I was genuinely proud of. Derek's cruelty couldn't touch that anymore. "Roberto," I said finally, my voice steady and clear, "I appreciate your professionalism in handling this situation. Derek made a serious error in judgment tonight, and what he did was unacceptable." Derek's face fell, and I could see him preparing for the worst. "However," I continued, "I think Derek understands the gravity of his mistake. Everyone deserves a chance to learn from their errors and do better." Roberto nodded thoughtfully. "Are you saying you'd prefer we handle this as a disciplinary matter rather than a termination?" I'm saying, I replied, looking directly at Derek, that I believe Derek can be better than what he showed tonight, but this can never happen again. To any guest, for any reason. Derek's relief was visible, but Roberto's expression remained serious. Derek, you understand that you're receiving an extraordinary second chance here. Any future incidents of any kind will result in immediate termination. Yes, sir, Derek managed, his voice barely above a whisper. I understand, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Roberto turned back to me. Your meal tonight is of course complimentary, and I'd like to invite you and your party to return as our guests anytime. He gestured to Derek. Please bring a fresh entree for this table immediately. And Derek, consider yourself lucky to have such a gracious sister. As Derek hurried away to get my replacement meal, Roberto lingered for a moment longer. If you don't mind me asking, what line of work are you in? Food and hospitality marketing, I replied. I run the Midwest division for the Rivera Communications Network. Roberto's eyebrows rose. Rivera, Marcus Rivera's firm? Marcus is actually sitting right here, I said, gesturing to my CEO. Roberto's entire demeanor shifted as he realized he was talking to industry executives. Mr. Rivera, it's an honor to meet you. Your work with the Purple Pig and Gibson's Restaurant Group has been exceptional. Marcus smiled. Thank you, Roberto. Your restaurant has been on our list of benchmarks for hospitality excellence for years. As Roberto and Marcus exchanged business cards and discussed potential collaboration, Janet leaned over to me. That was incredibly classy, she said quietly. You could have destroyed him, and you chose mercy. He's still my brother, I replied, even when he forgets how to be one. Derek returned with my new entree, his movements careful and professional. He placed the dish in front of me without a word, his face a mixture of gratitude and shame. Thank you, Derek, I said simply. He nodded and retreated, and the rest of our dinner proceeded without incident. Janet signed with our agency that night, impressed not just by our portfolio but by what she called my character under pressure. After Marcus and Janet left, I lingered at the restaurant, knowing Derek would need to process what had happened. He appeared as I was finishing my coffee, having changed out of his uniform and into street clothes. Emma, he said, sitting down across from me without invitation, I don't know what to say. How about starting with why? I suggested. Why you've spent your entire life trying to make me feel small, why you spat in my food tonight, why you can't stand to see me succeed. Derek was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Because you weren't supposed to be better than me. The honesty of it was startling. What do you mean? Growing up, I was the smart one, the athletic one, the successful one. That was my identity. He looked up at me with tired eyes. You were supposed to be the one who struggled, who needed help, who looked up to me. So you made sure I felt that way. I told myself I was being realistic, protecting you from disappointment, but really I was protecting myself from the possibility that you might be just as good as me, or better. I sat back in my chair, processing this admission. So when I started succeeding, it threatened everything I believed about myself, Derek finished. If Emma could build a successful career, make good money, run a division of a major company, then what made me special? What was my identity if I wasn't the successful Morrison sibling? The waiter brought Derek a glass of water, and he took a long drink before continuing. When I lost my job 6 months ago, it felt like everything was falling apart. I'd built my whole sense of self around being the accomplished one, and suddenly I was waiting tables while my little sister was closing deals and getting quoted in industry magazines. You could have told us about losing your job, I said. Mom and Dad would have been supportive. Derek laughed bitterly. Tell them that golden boy Derek got fired while average Emma was killing it in Chicago? I couldn't handle that conversation. So instead you've been lying to everyone. Not lying exactly, just managing the narrative. He rubbed his forehead. God, listen to me, I sound like such a fraud. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of dysfunction settling between us. Derek, I said finally, I never wanted to compete with you. I just wanted you to be proud of me, to support me, to be my brother instead of my critic. I know, he said, and for the first time I could remember, Derek's voice cracked with genuine emotion. I know, and I'm sorry. I've been a terrible brother to you, Emma. Terrible. The apology hung in the air between us. I'd waited my whole life to hear those words, and now that they'd finally come, I wasn't sure what to do with them. What happens now? I asked. Derek shrugged. I keep this job, if Roberto lets me stay after tonight. I try to figure out what I actually want to do with my life instead of just trying to maintain an image, and I hope that maybe eventually you might be able to forgive me. I studied my brother's face, seeing something I'd never seen before: humility. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a vulnerability that made him look younger and more human. Derek, I forgave you the moment I chose not to let Roberto fire you. His eyes filled with tears. Why? After everything I've done to you, why would you protect me? Because, I said, standing up from the table, someone once told me that not everyone can be exceptional. Turns out they were wrong. Everyone has the capacity to be better than they were yesterday, even you. Derek stood too, and for a moment I thought he might try to hug me. Instead, he extended his hand formally. Thank you, he said, for the second chance, for being the bigger person, for being better than I deserved tonight. I shook his hand, feeling like we were meeting for the first time as adults. Don't thank me yet, I said with a slight smile. Thank me by figuring out who you want to be when you're not trying to be better than me. As I walked out of Bella Vista that night, I felt something I'd never experienced before in my relationship with Derek. Peace. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd finally understood that his opinion of me had never been about me at all. It had always been about his own insecurities and fears. The next few months brought changes for both of us. Derek stayed at Bella Vista and threw himself into learning the restaurant business from the ground up. Roberto, impressed by Derek's dedication after our dinner incident, began training him in restaurant management. It turned out Derek actually had a talent for hospitality. His natural charm, when not being used to tear people down, made him excellent at customer relations. Meanwhile, my career continued to flourish. The contract with Janet's restaurant group was just the beginning. Word spread about our agency's approach to food and hospitality marketing, and we landed clients across the Midwest and beyond. I was featured on the cover of Restaurant Business magazine as one of the industry's rising stars, and the article mentioned my foundation's work supporting women-owned food businesses. Derek texted me a photo of the magazine cover with the message, "Proud of you, Em. Always should have been." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Our family dinners started to feel different, too. With Derek no longer needing to be the star of every conversation, space opened up for real connection. Mom and Dad began asking more thoughtful questions about my work, and Derek started sharing honest updates about his life instead of carefully crafted success stories. The breakthrough came 6 months after the Bella Vista incident. Derek had been promoted to assistant manager and was considering enrolling in a hospitality management program. During one of our monthly family dinners, Dad was telling a story about a difficult customer at his construction job when Derek interrupted. You know, Derek said, looking at me, Emma probably handles 10 difficult clients a week and makes it look easy. She's got better people skills than anyone I know. The compliment was so unexpected and genuine that I nearly choked on my wine. Dad looked between us, clearly sensing something had shifted, but not sure what. Emma's always been good with people, Mom said. Remember how she used to diffuse your tantrums when you were little, Derek? Derek laughed. I remember Emma being way more mature than I was, even though I was older. Still is, actually. It was a small moment, but it felt like a turning point. For the first time in our lives, Derek was acknowledging my strengths without needing to diminish them or make them about himself. A year after the restaurant incident, Derek left Bella Vista to become general manager of a new farm-to-table restaurant in Evanston. The owners had been impressed by his work at Bella Vista and his growing reputation in the industry. On opening night, he invited me to be one of the first guests. I never would have found this path if that night hadn't happened, he told me as we sat at the chef's counter watching the kitchen work. Losing my marketing job felt like the end of the world, but it forced me to figure out what I actually wanted to do instead of just what looked impressive. "Are you happy?" I asked. Derek considered the question seriously. "I'm getting there. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something because I love it, not because it makes me look successful. It's terrifying and amazing." As I watched Derek work that night, greeting guests, coordinating with the kitchen, solving problems with creativity and grace, I saw a version of my brother I'd never known existed. Without the need to prove his superiority over me or anyone else, he'd become someone genuinely likable and good at what he did. My own life had continued to evolve as well. Rivera Communications had opened offices in 3 new cities, and I'd been promoted to Senior Vice President of Operations for the entire network. The foundation had awarded grants to over 50 women-owned food businesses, and several of our early recipients had grown into major regional players. I'd also started dating seriously for the first time since college. Michael was a chef I'd met through work, passionate about food, supportive of my career, and completely unimpressed by any drama that didn't happen in a kitchen. He treated my success as something to celebrate rather than manage or diminish. "You know," Derek said during one of our now regular coffee meetings, "I like this Michael guy. He seems to actually see you. As opposed to seeing you as an extension of himself, or a project to fix, or a threat to his ego." Derek stirred his latte thoughtfully. "I spent so many years not seeing you at all, just seeing my own insecurities reflected back at me." These conversations with Derek had become some of the most meaningful relationships in my life. We talked about our childhood differently now, examining the patterns that had shaped us and working to understand how we'd ended up where we were. "I think I was angry at you for not staying small," Derek admitted during one particularly honest conversation. "It was easier when I could protect myself by thinking you were limited. When you started succeeding, I had to face the fact that I'd been holding you back on purpose." "And holding yourself back too," I pointed out. "You were so focused on being better than me that you never figured out what you actually wanted to be good at." Derek nodded. "I was performing success instead of actually achieving it. No wonder I got fired. I was coasting on charm and reputation instead of developing real skills." The healing between us wasn't linear or simple. There were still moments when Derek's old patterns would surface, a subtle put-down disguised as advice, or a need to one-up my accomplishments. But now when it happened, he'd catch himself and apologize. "Sorry," he'd say, "old habits, let me try that again." And he would. He'd ask genuine questions about my work, celebrate my wins without adding his own commentary, and offer support instead of management. The real test came when I was offered an opportunity that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. A major restaurant conglomerate wanted to create a new position, Chief Marketing Officer, for their entire portfolio of brands. It would mean moving to New York, overseeing marketing for restaurants across the country, and joining the C-suite of a Fortune 500 company. The salary was substantial enough that I'd never have to worry about money again. The visibility would make me one of the most powerful people in food and hospitality marketing. It was the kind of opportunity that comes along once in a career, if at all. When I told my family about the offer, their reactions were telling. Mom worried about me being so far away. Dad wondered if I was ready for that level of responsibility. And Derek? Derek grinned. "Emma, that's incredible. You're going to be running marketing for Brand Corp? Do you know how huge that is?" "You think I should take it?" "I think you'd be crazy not to," Derek said. "You've been building towards something like this your whole career. This is your moment." His enthusiasm was genuine and infectious. For the first time in our lives, Derek was genuinely excited about my success without any need to temper it or manage it. "What about the risk?" Mom asked. "It's such a big company, so much pressure." Derek jumped in before I could answer. "Mom, Emma's been handling pressure like this for years. She's turned around struggling restaurant brands, managed multi-million-dollar campaigns, and built a division from scratch. If anyone can handle Brand Corp, it's her." I stared at my brother, This person who'd spent decades telling me I was average, now advocating for my ability to take on one of the biggest jobs in our industry. Besides, Derek continued, if she doesn't take it, some other executive will, and they'll probably never build a foundation for women entrepreneurs or care about supporting small businesses the way Emma does. Brandcorp needs someone with her values. That night, Derek walked me to my car after dinner. I meant what I said in there, he told me. This job is perfect for you. You're going to change that company for the better. I'm scared, I admitted. What if I can't handle it? What if I fail? Derek stopped walking and turned to face me. Emma, do you remember what I used to tell you about limitations? I nodded, the old pain still sharp despite everything. I was wrong, Derek said simply. You don't have limitations. You have infinite potential, and you always have. I was just too threatened by that to admit it. He paused, his expression serious. You're not going to fail because you don't know how to fail. You only know how to work harder, learn faster, and find solutions. That's who you've always been. The certainty in his voice, the complete absence of the old condescension, brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. No, Derek said, pulling me into a hug that felt like 20 years of hurt finally healing. Thank you for never giving up on being extraordinary, even when I tried to convince you not to be. I took the job at Brandcorp. The transition to New York was challenging but exciting, and the role exceeded even my ambitious expectations. I was profiled in Forbes as one of the marketing executives transforming American food culture. The foundation expanded nationally, supporting women entrepreneurs in all 50 states. Derek and I talk every week now, our conversations ranging from industry gossip to family updates to deeper discussions about life and purpose. He's planning to open his own restaurant next year, a casual place focused on supporting local farmers and providing good jobs with benefits and advancement opportunities. I want to build something that makes the industry better, he told me during his last visit to New York, the way you've always done. Recently, Derek sent me a photo that made me laugh until I cried. It was a newspaper clipping from our hometown paper about my promotion to Brandcorp with a headline that read, "Local girl makes good in big city." Derek had circled the word girl and written in the margin, "Wrong. Local powerhouse makes waves in big city. Fixed it for them." Looking back, I realized that the night at Bella Vista wasn't really about revenge at all. It was about choice. I could choose to perpetuate the cycle of hurt by destroying Derek when I had the power to do so. Or I could choose to break the cycle by showing him a different way to be. The mercy I showed Derek that night wasn't just for him, it was for me too. It freed me from the need for his validation or his punishment. It allowed me to step fully into my own power without being defined by his opinion or limited by his fears. Derek is genuinely proud of me now, but more importantly, I'm proud of myself. Not because I proved him wrong, though I did, but because I chose to be bigger than the hurt he'd caused me. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't crushing someone who underestimated you. Sometimes it's giving them the chance to see who you really are and who they could be too. If you're watching this and you have someone in your life who's made you feel small, remember that their opinion of you isn't the truth about you. Build your empire anyway. Pursue your dreams anyway, succeed anyway. And when you get the chance to show them who you really are, choose to be bigger than their expectations, not just of you, but of themselves. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. But sometimes, when you shine bright enough, even the people who tried to dim your light will finally understand what they were looking at all along. Have you ever had someone underestimate you, only to be proven spectacularly wrong? Share your story in the comments below, and if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they're capable of more than anyone else believes. Thank you for listening to my journey from the family disappointment to the executive suite. And remember, dogs don't eat last. Wolves eat whenever they damn well please.